Hey everybody, good Wednesday evening. I'm not Scotty Powell. Scotty is having some internet issues because he has a fantastic internet provider in Western North Carolina that seems to not like him very much. But instead, I'll be joining you tonight and leading the discussion. This is the June 8th. Wow, it's hard to believe it's already June 8th edition of the Carolina Weather Group Hangout. We're talking hurricanes tonight and seeing what's going on in the tropical realm. Look, we've already had, what, three named storms already this year on the C name, but we still have a whole season ahead of us. So we've got a few guests on to chat a little bit about hurricanes and hurricane preparedness, one from East Region tonight. First, I want to send around our panel here and check in with our regular guests, or regular panelists, I should say. We'll first start off with Kit down in the North Carolina region. How's everything going tonight?
Not a cloud in the sky. Pretty much all day today. It has been very, very nice and clear. I think it popped up to about 84 at the house, and it's just been an absolutely gorgeous day today. We had a good bit of rain over the weekend from all that stuff coming through. Yesterday it was funny. We had two heavy downpours, each like 3 minutes long, and then a band of really heavy rain was just streaming from Shelby all the way to UNC Charlotte. And SOAR got started up this week, and they were utilizing their umbrellas pretty early in the season. Other than that, I'm looking forward to the heat. Unlike some people, I do really enjoy when it's like 90 degrees outside. I don't enjoy being it, but I like just the overall sense of like the summer heat is finally here.
Well, speaking of a place where you can maybe escape some of the summer heat, let's say hello to Scotty up in the mountains of North Carolina. Hopefully his internet hangs in there just long enough to let him say hi to us. What's going on, Scotty?
I think we're good right now. My modem's showing all green lights, so that's good. Yeah, we're doing well today. 80 degrees today, not a cloud in the sky, a nice northwest breeze, so a beautiful day and no humidity. And it's June the 8th, and we had absolutely no humidity today. So unseen territory here in the Carolinas, especially in June, but the heat does return this week. I'm right there with Kid. I can't wait for the mid-90s. So finally enjoy some warm temperatures by the pool or lake or wherever. So fairly quiet weather week. We've had some on and off showers throughout the weekend, but nothing too major. So all's been quiet here in the Carolinas.
Enjoy it while it lasts, I guess. James, you're also our final Carolina panelist. What's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, I can verify what Kit said. There is not a cloud in the sky. See, I just thought I'd independently verify that. But yeah, back in the Carolinas, back in Charlotte, after being, I don't want to say trapped at my parents' house because that's not nice to my parents. But I had a flight scheduled out for Sunday, and that line of storms that rolled through the Northeast and parts of the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. At a 4:30 flight. By 10 o'clock in the morning, JetBlue had already canceled it. Not trying to fault JetBlue. I don't know what their reasoning was, but that surprised me that they had canceled the flight 6 hours in advance. So made it out early the next morning, and here I am realizing now we're going to be flirting with upper 90s, close to, but hopefully not 100 degrees by the end of the week. So can I go back to New York?
I wonder if JetBlue has meteorologists like FedEx does.
I was wondering that. I know Delta does. I like to think JetBlue does. It makes me feel better when I'm flying.
So maybe they use a small subsidiary there. Well,
yeah, I remember down at ANS they were saying Delta had about 20 of them that were all located in Atlanta.
Yeah.
All right, so now we'll have to figure out if JetBlue does.
Okay. There was going to be wedges up there, so
Well, I'm surprised Peter is still alive, honestly, and being able to join us after some of the social media talk that I saw over the past couple of days. Peter, is your house still there? Is this a mirage I'm seeing?
Yeah, is this just a green screen behind me? I don't know. Yeah, it's been wicked the past few days. I mean, we've just one storm after another, and Sunday we had the enhanced risk, but it didn't turn out the way it was supposed to be because we're supposed to have supercells and all that mess. Everybody hyped that up, but today I was enjoying a nice Chick-fil-A lunch, and
you can do that in Philly?
We can. And all of a sudden it just got pitch black out, and big downpour, a lot of straight line winds, and now we have trees down everywhere, power's out in a lot of places, so it's been a crazy day. But we made it here, it's good, electricity's still on, So we have a good show tonight. So
Man,
I got all the guests on.
that sounds like the best day ever. You get Chick-fil-A and a thunderstorm.
I wasn't expecting that, but we just had a marginal risk. But
Yeah, just a
Oh,
marginal
well.
risk.
You know,
Yeah.
Ricky, if he was in front of a green screen, it would explain why nothing behind him moves from week to week.
that's true. That's true.
And plus, Peter, you get to keep the internet, and I'm here where it's sunny, and my internet always goes in and out. So what's up with that?
You got to drop
I
that
think he has
service
his own
you have.
private server.
I do.
All right. Well, let's round out the, as James Spanley would say, the mahogany table. We're not maybe classy enough to have mahogany. We're probably still on like plywood or something around here.
I've got a
We'll
snack
send
table.
it down to Shay in Charleston and let him say hello as well.
Hey, Ricky, how are you? Yeah, we had Tropical Storm Colin barely brushed the coastline Monday morning, and Tuesday morning. We didn't get very much wind out of it. I think the higher winds actually came upon departure of the storm yesterday afternoon. So, we just got brushed by the storm. We didn't get the plaid knocked off of us like Pete did there. The temperatures are actually they're very mild today with low humidity, about 85 degrees at the beaches, and felt really good. We're supposed to have a pretty cool night, unseasonably cool, I think low 60s, and then we get back up a little bit warmer tomorrow and into Saturday, and then Sunday for the heat wave. I think we're going to be hitting in the upper 90s, probably the hottest day of the year. So that's the southeast in a nutshell. As far as the winds go, we have sea breeze building each day with a cold front dropping down Sunday, so we're looking at stronger winds along the immediate beaches.
All right. Sounds like we may need to take a trip down to Charleston there if you want to escape some of those 90s that, or at least on the beaches that everyone's been talking about. Speaking of Charleston and the areas around Shay, let's say hello to one of our panelists tonight and bring all three of them in here shortly once we check in with one. Rob Fowler joins us once again. He's been on our show before, but welcome back, Rob.
Yeah, I'm actually at home. I took the day off. We survived the Cantori curse, by the way. I don't know if you saw, but Jim was here, and pretty much nothing happened at the market, which we were happy about. So, we had a hot day. It was 91 for the North Charleston reporting station at the airport. Shay mentioned a little cooler on the beaches. We're a little waterlogged. We're running about 5 inches above normal for the year, and a lot of that has fallen to Bonnie and also Colin most recently. So we're trying to dry out. Looks like we've got a string of nice days coming up, and as you guys have already mentioned, we could be in the upper 90s. I think 94 is our hottest temperature so far this year, and I think we're about to exceed that here very soon.
We're forecasting 90s here in the mountains of eastern Tennessee, and that's shocking to me, but hey, we'll see when we come by the weekend. That little ridge may help us out. All right, let's head a little bit further to the south and west and check in on the Gulf Coast and say hi to Matt Lanza joining us, I believe, for the first time on our Carolina Weather Group show. Matt, how's everything down in Houston tonight?
It's been pretty good for a change. We've had. I guess we're about due for our next massive flooding event here. It's only been about 3 or 4 days since the last one. So it seems like every other week we're having something pretty ridiculous here. So it's been wet. I think we've had something like 30 inches of rain since the beginning of April, officially at Bush Airport, north side of the city. We also still have not officially hit 90 degrees in Houston, which is now the third latest date into the year that we have. We've gone that far. So if we get to June 12th without hitting 90, it'll be number 2. So this is a pretty impressive streak that we have going on here. It's been actually tolerable for Houston in June. I mean, we're just buying time at this point.
It seems like you guys have been waterlogged a lot like Charleston has after these tropical systems, and
it's just one after the other. I mean, we had a massive flooding event back in mid-April. We've had a little bit more localized flooding events since then. It hasn't been really the city of Houston, but the suburbs. And I mean, Houston is massive. It's about 100, 125 miles to go from one side of the city to the other. So you have a large spatial area that gets impacted, and we've certainly paid for that this year. And obviously, we've just had some pretty severe flooding on the Brazos River, just west of the city. That fortunately is now winding down, and hopefully those people that have been flooded 3 or 4 times in the last year don't have to do it again for a while.
hopefully not, and hopefully you guys don't get impacted by any systems this year that could, make your flooding a little bit worse. We'll circle back around to that in just a little bit. I want to bring in our third and final guest here, Gary Szatkowski. I know I said that wrong, Gary.
Hey, it was great.
I'm doing well for a time. As I say on television, it's live TV and I can't get it back. This is a live hangout. I can't get it back. So if I mess it up, I just roll with it. So
I've been called much worse, so don't worry. So yeah, it's been well today. I mean, we had near wedge conditions with the severe weather coming through. So we actually did finally get some severe weather with some power outages due to straight line winds. We had some. I hear about the heat coming. Right now, we're kind of almost trying to keep it at bay here in our region. As far as for the upcoming weekend. So right now it's cool. Like right now I think it's may not even be 60 outside. The dew points dropped after the rain came through earlier today. We've got some really mild cool conditions for this time of year. So some spots will be down in the 40s tonight. And then it gradually gets a little warmer as we get into the weekend. But yeah, right now we're not bringing any of the extreme heat up into the Philadelphia area. We'll see. It's going to be close, though. We're probably down in the Delmarva. We are going to be hitting 90s, but I think in Philly right now we're not looking at temperatures much higher than low to mid 80s. So, which isn't bad for this time of year.
And for people who maybe aren't familiar with you or don't follow you on Twitter or haven't seen you in the realm of weather, talk a little bit about your role up in the Philadelphia area and what your job is up there.
Well, I'm retired, but up until 2 weeks ago, Friday, May 27th, was my last day with the National Weather Service. I was the meteorologist in charge at the Mount Holly office in New Jersey, which is to the northeast of Philadelphia. And that office covers almost all of New Jersey, all of eastern Pennsylvania, including the Philadelphia metropolitan area, all of Delaware, southeast, northeast Maryland. So there's about 11 million people in that service area. That's number 2 among weather offices for the National Weather Service. There's about 120 offices like that across the country. I was in charge of the office I got here in '97. Just retired, like I said, a little less than 2 weeks ago. So, seen a few things. Sandy, obviously. Irene, the year before that, going way back to ancient history. Floyd back in '99. I think 3 or 4 out of the top 10 snowstorms in Philly's history occurred while I've been here. So there's something statistically wrong about while I've been here. It's been very active, and whether it's winter storms or hurricanes. So it's been an active time. I really enjoyed my time with the Weather Service. Now trying to get the hang of this retirement thing.
My apologies. I missed that memo. Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
So let's kind of backtrack a little bit, though, and I'm going to throw you back in the job for a little bit and have you talk about, now that we're going into June, we're going into hurricane season, talk a little bit about the atmosphere in a National Weather Service forecast office on the coastline as you guys kind of move into hurricane season.
Well, sure. During this time of year, and also the fact that we're where we are, a lot of times you don't have to worry about too many storms up this way this time of year. The water temperatures are still pretty cold, so it's very tough for a tropical system to get up here until later in the summer. So right now it's about preparing the operations that if we hadn't already finalized the testing, we'd do final testing on any software changes for the upcoming hurricane season. There's training every year, and so the staff would be wrapping up the training in terms of how to put out the products for the upcoming tropical season. Training is probably more important for the hurricane program at our office than a lot of the other programs, simply because a year can go by where we don't have any hurricanes up here, and that can be true for other weather offices too. But particularly up here, it's something that on average, maybe every third or fourth year, we'll actually have to be putting out the suite of products associated with a tropical cyclone. So as opposed to winter storms or flash flooding, which we get those every year multiple times, tropical systems require more training. Just because you got to be ready to go, and you don't have any real life practice to kind kind of bridge you a lot of times. Obviously, after Sandy, you know, we were pretty well trained for the 2013 season after Sandy in 2012, just because you know, we didn't have any staff turnover and everyone had gone through that. But now that it's been a couple of years, we have some new people at the office in Mount Holly, so you know, training would be one of the key aspects of what we're doing right now. And obviously keep an eye on the tropics. I mean, I say things, you know, are likely not to happen this early in the season, but it's possible. So the other thing would be just also starting to watch the tropics, watching the discussions out of the Hurricane Center, watching social media. Social media, actually with Sandy, social media was probably like our first tripwire as much as anything else in terms of people starting to chat about some of the long-range stuff. It's in the discussions too, but if you're kind of like looking at stuff over breakfast, you know, to kind of see what the message of the day is, social media a lot of times is reacting to these extreme events out at 8-9 days discussing possibilities, and we saw that with Sandy.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, of course, the job has kind of transformed over the years, and perhaps no one better to kind of talk about how social media has come into play than Matt down in Houston, talking a little bit about how, you know, you've run a local page down in Houston, I believe on Twitter, at Space Weather. Is that correct?
Yeah, I work with, so my primary day job is as a meteorologist at a natural gas company down here, and I work on a trade floor there and kind of advise them on longer term weather, but sort of as, you know, as many of us, weather is not just a job, it's also a hobby. I kind of work on the background. I got called by or contacted by Eric Berger, who was the science writer at the Houston Chronicle, and he was looking to expand his weather content there at the time. Well, he left the Chronicle back in, I believe, the fall to be the space writer for Ars Technica, and, you know, now that he has a little bit more freedom, I guess, to do more, he said, well, let's kind of continue this weather blog that we have. He's got a very good following on Facebook that he built over a long time, and I just sort of got looped into that kind of as well. I used to work in TV, so I used to write in a blog. I'm very active on social media, and I try to stay pretty plugged into what's going on. So we've kind of become almost an alternative voice in Houston for at least a good chunk of people to kind of go to, and it's really helped during the floods and stuff to sort of tamp down hype, but be serious about, you know, what the situation is. Basically, the motto is, if we're serious and we're being concerned about a certain weather situation, then you need to be serious and concerned about it too. And I mean, you should always be serious about weather, but a lot of times things get lost in translation just because of all the noise there is, especially in a place like Houston where you've got a number of TV stations, a number of social media pages, and things like that. So we tend to work to try and tamp that down and sort of be a rational, reasonable voice for people to turn to when they want weather information down here. And it's been interesting the last few months to see what's happened with all the flooding, and, you know, people are legitimately concerned now when it rains. Whenever we have thunderstorms in the forecast, the question is, are we going to flood again? And that's what everybody thinks, and the whole dynamic has kind of changed here. It rains a lot in Houston, but in the last couple of years, since last Memorial Day when we had our first real big flood event, you know, everybody is now a little bit more nervous, a little bit more concerned, and, you know, we're just trying to sort of play along with that and help people to get through, you know, weather events as they happen down here.
So I want you to comment a little bit about how maybe throughout the start of the hurricane season you perhaps get people in that mindset. And then, Rob, I'd also like you to comment on that afterwards, if you may.
Sure.
Talk about, from a broadcast side, what the months leading up to and kind of kicking off hurricane season are like in the broadcast sector. So, Matt, I'll let you go ahead first.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was in TV, it was in upstate New York, so we didn't really care too much about it. We had lake effect snow, 100 inches of snow a year, and it was just, you know, ridiculous. But you know, kind of translating what I learned in TV to what we're doing now, you know, with the blog and whatnot, it helps to keep people focused on the fact that, look, you know, we live in a place that's very prone to hurricanes. Houston gets hit, you know, relatively frequently to some of the other large cities in the country, and you know, you want people to have a plan, you want people to be prepared, and it's kind of just to reinforce that constantly. Because the only way people are going to listen to you is if you just, you know, keep reinforcing those good practices without driving, you know, people crazy with hype and freaking them out and whatnot. And we've had, you know, a few tropical threats from time to time down here the last couple of years. We had Tropical Storm Bill last year, which came on the heels of the record flooding that we had last Memorial Day in 2015. So people were a little bit concerned about the rain aspect of that then. You know, the key is one of the big things in Houston is that we have so many new people that we don't know if they've been through hurricanes. We don't know exactly where they've come from, but they've moved here. Since Hurricane Ike, we've added about 1 million people in the metropolitan area of Houston. That's in less than 10 years. So the growth down here has been explosive. You have a lot of people that aren't as familiar perhaps with how things are. So it's sort of twofold. Just reinforce the good principles of having a plan and being prepared and listening and knowing where to go and to get information. And then also when there are these sort of marginal threats, to keep people tuned in, but let them know when they don't need to worry and when things don't matter as much, for us at least. It might matter for their neighbors somewhere else in Texas or elsewhere in the Gulf, but in the Houston area, you know, perhaps maybe not as much.
And Rob, I imagine that turnover is even more significant in the Charleston area. I mean, we had another show we did about Hugo, and just thinking of how many years it's been since you guys have taken a direct hit by, let's say, a Category 3 or higher storm, you know, it's been many years.
Well, we're coming up on, 27 years now, and what Matt was saying, here in the Charleston area, we have some of the fastest growing communities in the whole country. I think 48 people are moving here every day. That's 48 people who have not gone through anything like Hurricane Hugo or even anything even close to a tropical system that would produce a lot of rain. Now in October, of course, we had Joaquin and all that went into play there, and that really opened a lot of eyes because for all practical purposes, even though Joaquin was one little player, the bulk of that was coming with some other weather factors as well, and that dumped, 2 feet, 3 feet of rain in some places in a short amount of time. So our goal really is to educate people, and as you guys know, we can talk till we're blue in the face, but many people won't start listening until something's on the doorstep. So you can have hurricane preparedness expos, you can have speeches to the local churches and local community groups, but really a lot of folks don't act on anything until it's knocking on your door, which obviously for us is too late. So we do the best job we can. We prepare our hurricane guide, we fine-tune it, we add information if needed, and this is the time of the year we try to tell people to get prepared, because typically here in Charleston in South Carolina, we're late season storms. Of course, we've had 2 tropical systems already impact us, but typically August, September, early October are the months that we usually see most of our activity, which gives us a little extra lead time to get ready for the meat of the season for us.
Talk a little bit, if you will, about kind of how your station prepares in general. I imagine you guys kind of have a hurricane plan in place if something were to occur during the season.
Yeah, we do. We have a great plan, but also just like our general population here, I would say there's nobody at the station that went through Hurricane Hugo who works there right now except for me. But we've got other people in place who have been through other things at other places, but not actually what we experience. So it's a learning curve for our reporters. They come in and they want a hurricane. They root on hurricanes because it looks good on the resume tape as they get blown around in the wind. For those of us who've experienced it, yeah, it sounds really romantic and all, but when you live it, it's no fun at all. So we root against them. They root for them. I have to kind of calm them down a little bit when a hurricane or tropical system is approaching, but that's part of what we do as meteorologists to educate our staff in addition to the general population. But yes, we do have a plan, Ricky, and we try to fine-tune it based on what's been happening and the growth and the new people. We have to tell them, you're going here, you're going to Folly, you're going to Edisto, you're going to Isle of Palms, you're going to Sullivan's Island. So we just have different pieces to the puzzle we have to plug in, but the plan pretty much stays the same. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot from Hurricane Hugo. I mean, that was more than anything else for me. Professionally, that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. It was one of the worst things, too, but it was the best because it really opened everybody's eyes about what could happen and what will happen again. Not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And like Matt was saying, we have so many more people here who are, and Shay knows this firsthand, being out at the beach. When I came for Hugo, or I got here in '87, 2 years before Hugo, there was a house, a house, a house, a house. Now there's house, 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 house. And these are $1 million homes right on Front Beach.
Yeah, there's going to be some significant impacts for anything else that comes. And even since Hugo 27 years ago, people haven't been around that long, but some people were here during the scare for Floyd in 1999, and that was an evacuation nightmare of sorts. but we've been assured by the governor's office and emergency management that the reversal of the lanes will happen, but our infrastructure, and that can be material for another show, but that's just something to start thinking about is our infrastructure for the increase in development we've seen and the population increase, especially along the coastline. It's incredible. So that's definitely something to be concerned about.
Yeah, just a little nugget, Shay. Yeah, we had the exercise. They did the exercise today, statewide exercise of reversing the lanes. And unlike Georgia, Georgia has arms officially that can come down automatically. We have to position people at all these exits, which takes a lot of manpower that really the Highway Patrol will admit they don't have. So, but they practice it every year. So post-Floyd, let's hope that the plan, we never need it, but if we do, that it's certainly in place to alleviate an 18-hour trip to Columbia, which usually takes about an hour. Well, if you speed, an hour and a half.
Right. And recently, I know someone has a question here, but recently with Bonnie, our first encounter with a tropical system here, we didn't get very much here in Charleston, even though it made landfall. But just to our south, near Savannah, about 22 miles to the north, and Ridgeland at I-95 completely flooded over with just, I think it was about 8 to 10 inches of rain within a very small amount of time. So there you have an evacuation route is already underwater.
I talked to a Highway Patrol guy who was in our newsroom the other day, and I asked him if he had ever seen that before, and he said, no, we're talking about Interstate 95, major artery, north-south, and the northbound lane was shut down. The southbound, I think they had some issues, but it was the northbound lane that they had to divert traffic off the interstate for a period and get people on the side roads to get to where they were going.
Yeah, and we saw what happened in the Columbia area between here and Charleston for the October flooding event. We still haven't quite recovered from that. I think our water tables are still very high, and we saturate very quickly still.
Yeah, it certainly is something. I know here in Virginia we have the little gates that come down, but you know, like you're saying, you could get some moisture ahead of a system, even just like rain, like we had during Isabel ahead of the system, and that can significantly impact the amount of trees that go down, and of course the amount of impact from some of those feeder bands that move onshore as well. I want to bring in Kid. He has a question to ask some of our panelists.
Yeah, so Rob, you were, and Shay, he sort of touched on a little bit, but like talking about, Rob again, talking about how your station is preparing for this, when it does get to a point where they start to recommend or even mandate an evacuation of the coastal areas where landfall might be made, do you, as the news station, like, are y'all one of the last ones to leave, or do you just stay on there to help write it out if there are those few people who didn't leave to still inform them that way?
Well, they don't issue voluntary evacuations anymore here. It's all mandatory, and it has to be done by the governor. They realize that voluntary evacuations, people just did not heed the warnings and didn't leave. That's our big, selling point, as Shay mentioned, post-Floyd, is now we can really bring home the point of leave early, and then you don't have to deal with any issues if there are issues. So yes, we have a building in Mount Pleasant. We're about 12 feet above sea level, and we have a generator. We learned a lot from Hugo. This is a newer building post-Hugo, but they tell me it can withstand a Category 4 hurricane. I'm not quite sure I want to be the guinea pig when that happens, but if it does, we'll be there. But yeah, we plan on staying and broadcasting as long as we possibly can. With Hugo, we did have to leave our building. We didn't have all the same structures that we have now, so we actually left. I went to the National Weather Service out at our airport with about 13 other meteorologists. I was the only media guy there, and that's where we spent the night during Hurricane Hugo. So, but our plan is to stay there. We're there to inform. One thing that we realized, and you guys have used it as well, is this whole new Periscope Facebook Live thing gives us another avenue that if the power goes out and people can't see our TV signal, even though we may still be broadcasting, that we can go on social media and get the word out. And we've had several instances. We had a tornado on Johns Island, one of our communities, back in September, and then we had the floods in October. So back-to-back events, we were able to get the word out via social media, via Facebook.
Yeah, hats off, Rob. You do a fantastic job at that. I know it's an up-and-coming thing. Weather Service Charleston starting to use Periscope more and more as well. So that's it's really good. You're setting the stage for a lot of people here, and it's really great.
Thanks, Shay.
I think a very important thing we need to hit on here, though, as Kit mentioned, mandatory evacuations, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong in your region, but mandatory isn't 100% mandatory how you guys would think the term mandatory. I mean, police aren't going to come in and rip you out of your house.
And they will readily admit that. They don't have a number of people. They've got other things they're doing, and they will say it's a mandatory evacuation, but physically they're not going to come and actually remove you from your structure, your home. I know, and Shay probably remembers this as well, when Hugo was coming, they went to Folly Beach, and they went door to door, and they started taking next of kin if the people decided they didn't want to leave. And that's a true story, and because they've said, we're not coming back. Because they're not going to put their people in harm's way, the first responders, if they have to come back and try to rescue somebody.
I know, like you kind of just said, that's the deal in Hampton Roads. Once winds get above tropical storm force strength, they're not going out to rescue you unless, you know, there's extreme circumstances. And we've heard those stories in storms like that before, but there's always the aside cases that sometimes get special circumstances. But Gary, I want to bring... Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
I was about to say Gary, too. You can continue.
Okay. Now, I want to bring Gary in, though, to kind of comment, because perhaps no one knows the struggles of getting people out earlier than you. I actually have your personal plea on my wall to the right now, in case I ever need to use it in the event of a major hurricane impacting Hampton Roads, because it's just that good. Talk a little bit about how, especially in the last couple of years, the Weather Service has been trying to bridge the gap from just, you know, pushing out forecasts to being more of a forefront in the social media and social science realm.
Sure. Yeah, that's obviously that was important during Sandy. You know, we learned some lessons, and it's continued to be important. We find that, you know, that type of messaging, you know, you obviously have to adjust it based on the weather scenario, but it's just as important in some respects for major winter storms that can become hazardous too. But yeah, I mean, basically what we found is that you know, meteorologists love weather. Everyone else pretty much puts up with it or has a mild interest in it, but no one loves it as much as we do. So in our passion and in our excitement and in our desire to be as accurate as possible, we lose a lot of people just through the terminology we use, and frankly, I don't think we're very conscious of it. I think that's a Weather Service problem. I think that extends elsewhere through some of the other parts of the weather enterprise. You know, so, you know, like I think it was last year we had Anna, you know, and it was subtropical. Then it became it was a subtropical storm, and it became a tropical storm, and then it was on its way in the advisories from the Hurricane Center to becoming post-tropical or extratropical. By the end of that string of phraseology, you've lost almost everyone except other meteorologists. So we try real hard to speak the language of the general public, and when there's things like storm surge we're worrying about, we try to relate it to things they can relate to. If they're right along the coast, a lot of people are familiar with the NOAA tide gauges, and so we try to give them numbers and relate that to previous storms. And for people inland, they don't know tide gauges either. You know, once you get a little inland, they're not familiar with those, even though they could be susceptible to storm surge flooding. So there we try to use things like inundation, which would be the water level over the ground. But the bottom line is we try to talk plain language. We take what has been very meteorology has been a great success, has experienced a great success during the arc of my career. We've learned a lot. We know a lot more. We can say a lot more with a lot more confidence. And the trouble is now we can confuse people to a degree that was really almost never been possible in the past. You know, and at the same time, weather information is more valuable than it ever is. And so the last thing you want to do is confuse them. So we really, with the briefing packages we put out, which was one of the pages in that contained the personal plea that you've got, we stress plain language. We stress, I jokingly say, no words greater than 3 syllables. That, you know, we need to be able to talk to people so that they understand it. Because even if, and a lot of times who we're trying to reach, besides the general public, is key decision makers, mayors, governors, township officials, county executives. They're not meteorologists. There's probably someone who's like a weather enthusiast, you know, if they don't actually have someone who's formal job is to follow the weather. They probably have weather enthusiasts on their staff who tends to be the go-to person whenever there's active weather. And they'll understand even some of the most complicated Weather Service terminology, but they're not the ones calling the evacuation decision that you were talking about a moment ago. They're not calling the mandatory evacuations. They've got to convince a mayor or a township executive or a county executive, hey, we need to call an evacuation, or the governor, we need to convince them to call an evacuation. It better be in language they can understand. And so that's been a big focus, really, over the past several years, and certainly was heightened by the Sandy experience.
That's actually a good point there. I was going to ask a question as far as if you get a county emergency management crew, for instance, and they want to know, they're kind of confused. Rob, do you ever get anybody to call you, or Matt, does anyone ever call you and say, hey, translate this for us, what do we need to do? And how do you handle that? Do you try to put more of the weight on the local WFO from the National Weather Service, or do you try to answer that question for them immediately?
I'll try to answer that question the best I possibly can and interpret, and Gary, I'll ask you. I kind of think of this as the kinder, gentler National Weather Service now that they kind of use lowercase in some of their AFDs and other products, that they're not screaming at you. And I wonder if that's the psychology behind maybe kind of pulling things back a little bit and showing your passion, but not in that kind of a way. But yeah, we'll try to do the best we can. We get a lot of questions, social media, they're coming fast and furious. Everybody's so much more weather conscious because there's so much information at their fingertips. So you've got to try to cut to the chase, so to speak, and read between the lines and give them the best information you can.
Yeah, this is Gary. I will say, yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the lowercase. I mean, obviously we're pushing forward with that. That's a legacy from the teletype era, and I'm old enough. I remember when teletypes were still in the office when I got there. Yeah, we're changing. I loved working for the Weather Service. If I was to give any advice to the Weather Service now that I'm out the door, it would be simply, 2 words: move faster. I think the world is moving faster. And it's partly because of us, our own success, whether it's the Weather Service or TV meteorologists or the rest of the weather enterprise. We've gotten so good at what we do that people are now really starting to depend on us, and they're making all sorts of decisions that they never would have thought about making 10 or 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I wouldn't know what you were talking about if someone would say, oh, we're going to brine the highways. Now, they're out there. We've got a forecast. All we've got is imaginary snow. We've got snow in the forecast for 36 to 48 hours out, and there'll be Department of Transportation trucks out there preparing the highways for that. Whether it's a winter storm or a hurricane, now it's American Airlines that is a huge here in Philadelphia. They're flying all their planes out, in advance of the storm because they have faith now, whether it's a winter storm or a hurricane, that the track is accurate enough, the impacts are accurate enough, that it's a money-losing proposition that they stay here. You used to be able to kind of make money or get away with it, so to speak, if you went against the weather forecast. The weather forecasts have gotten so good now that is oftentimes, we're not perfect, but it's oftentimes, more often than not, a money-losing proposition. So now you've got all these folks doing all these things because we say something's going to happen. We want to make sure they understand exactly what it is we're trying to say. Because what 10 or 20 years ago was a $1 million decision, it's now a $10 million decision. What was a $10 million decision is like a $100 million decision. There's a whole lot more stuff being moved onto the table now. The chips on the table are much bigger in terms of what people are doing when the weather forecast says there's going to be some bad weather on the way. We want to make sure that message, whatever message we're trying to get across, we want to make sure we're getting it across in a way that the general public and key decision makers understand. Who are never going to be weather experts. Our job is to, I say, we're in the process, and again, we're doing this, but we need to do more of it. We're transitioning from being great. I compare things to medical a lot. We're in the process of, transitioning from being great technical doctors. We're going to become even greater technical doctors, but we're going to also develop now a much better bedside manner. That we need to be able to say stuff that people understand who are under a lot of stress. Calling an evacuation decision is very stressful. Doing an evacuation, moving your family, worrying about maybe elder care or kids or pets, that's very stressful. You better be talking to for those people in a way that is both technically correct but also compassionate and effective, or you're going to see decisions. You're going to see people not evacuating when they should. You're going to see other very bad decisions. That's just going to come from people not being willing to make a tough call. And our job is to try to give them all the information in a way they can understand it so they can make the tough call.
I know James has a question. I think Scotty does as well. I just want to hit on this real quick, and then we'll circle back around and kind of wrap this show up here. This is a question for all three of our panelists. Do you believe that your region is better prepared now, as we're in this social media realm, than they were maybe 5, 10 years ago? Putting aside maybe any storms that have impacted 5 or 10 years ago, and maybe how recent that was in the people's minds, do you believe we're better prepared now with social media, with more dissemination methods than we used to be, with just maybe 1 or 2 voices kind of saying something? Let's bring Matt in first, and then we'll go to Rob, and then we'll bring Gary in.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, but with an asterisk, I guess. Because with social media, you also have so much noise, so there's a lot of misinformation that can get spread out there and things like that. But I think in general, you seem to be better prepared for certain events, and I think it will when the time does come. I mean, at least down here in Houston, it's been 8 years since Hurricane Ike hit. The area is much better prepared, and I think because of Ike and because of Rita 3 years before that in 2005, because I don't know how much everybody remembers about Rita, but the disaster in that storm, besides the storm itself, was the evacuation of coastal Texas. And the Houston area, I think there were something like 2.5 million people that left the region, which is just an astounding number, and the highways down here do not hold 2.5 million people, and clearly that was a problem then. But you also had compounding factors like 100-degree heat, so a lot of the deaths were actually people that were dying of heat stroke and dying in their cars because it was too hot. But the lessons that everybody learned from that were invaluable, and that helped a little bit during Ike. Of course, there was the whole idea of, people, well, I left during Rita and that was a nightmare, I'm not going to leave during Ike. So you had that going on, but then when Ike hit, people said, wow, the next time there's a storm like this, I'm going to leave. So down here, at least, I think there's definitely a better sense of preparedness. The wild card in all this for us is obviously the fact that we have 1 million new people that are living here since Hurricane Ike, and you don't necessarily know how familiar they are. You've got people that might be 70, 80 miles from the coast that say, hey, I need to evacuate and get out of here because it's going to be a rough storm, that don't necessarily need to. So you're dealing with a lot of compounding factors with a lot of new people. But fortunately, at least the people that were here during both Ike and Rita do have, kind of good lessons to kind of live by. And certainly with the amount of information that gets out now, I think we're generally better off than we were, 5 or 10 years ago. At least that's the hope.
I definitely concur with Matt. Again, our biggest fear is all the misinformation that we'll have to kind of do a lot of damage control. But fortunately for us, we haven't had to really deal with that. I think 2012 with Sandy, I think that was so many Photoshop pictures and all this misinformation. I think that taught us a lot. For us to be really careful about what we say on the air and what we show on the air to make sure it's legitimate before we do. But yeah, social media also has given us, as we mentioned a little while ago, many, many more avenues to get the word out. When Hugo came through, we had the 3 TV stations, we had the newspaper, and a couple of radio stations that were able to survive through the storm, and that was it. So there was only really 5 or 6 different outlets for you to get information, vital information about a hurricane that was coming on shore. But now there's many, many more ways to get it. And before I know Gary's next, but I got to give a shout out. One of the best things I think the Weather Service has ever done was NWS Chat, because that really lets us inside their world, and they give us a little heads up about their thinking, their thought process. What that allows us to do is to give our viewers a little insight as well and get them prepared maybe a little sooner. Hey guys, this may be coming. There might be a watch issued, or we're watching this cell that could be tornadic. So Gary, kudos to the Weather Service. I know it probably took a lot of pushing buttons to get that across the board, but from my standpoint as a TV meteorologist, it's been one of the best things I've seen, and I've been doing this about 34 years.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the feedback on NWS Chat. Yeah, it's there's a lot of different ways to communicate out there now, and that certainly has been one that's shown a lot of positive. And yeah, to answer the question, yeah, and just to echo what has been said already, yes, I think with social media, it's a benefit that in terms of if something was to threaten the region. I think it's pretty clear now that when we look at the decision-making process, whether it's a homeowner or a family, a family or head of a business, or going all the way to like a mayor or a governor, they don't jump based on one piece of information. What they do, particularly if it's a tough decision, a challenging decision, they look for confirming information. So we see this when we put out a tornado warning. I've told my staff, all those call to action statements you put at the bottom of the warning. I mean, you can keep doing it, but just know that no one's going to do that, right? You say take immediate action. The only immediate action people take, even for a tornado warning, unless there's actually a tornado bearing down on their house and they can quickly establish that, is they seek out additional information. If they heard the tornado warning over radio, they'll turn on TV. If they saw the warning on the internet, or if they saw it on TV, rather, they'll fire up their internet and take a quick look, at the radar, or look at the other weather data. People always look for confirmation before they make a tough decision or make an important decision. Social media now allows us to add that voice to the decision-making process. That, along with hearing what they are on television or over the internet, now they can see via social media. And people are we see this particularly like with river flooding. People are very sensitive to what their neighbor's doing. If their neighbor, it looks like they're packing up, we see a whole neighborhood start to pack up as soon as one or two neighbors start to leave an area next to a river that's going to flood. So the group behavior is important also, and social media can be a problem. You've got the fake reports, but generally speaking, it's more of a positive. It tends to reinforce the behaviors that we want people to do, and it's part of a consistent message to get people to do what they need to do to protect themselves.
I think that was pretty resounding in everyone's answer there. All right, we're coming close to 9 o'clock, so I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time to have everyone plug how they can be contacted, but let's give James the floor and let him ask a question, and then immediately following we'll have Scotty throw in his question, and then we'll kind of wrap everything up here.
I'll try to keep my question brief then, because I know we still have a lot we want to talk about, and this can go out to whoever, but we'll, I guess, start with Gary and then see if the other guys want to jump in. I think the internet has allowed the National Weather Service to share a lot of their data with the general public. I think that's one of the great things about it. But Gary, I'm curious if you ever came across an instance where you felt that maybe there should be a point where some of that data gets held back just to keep it from, forgive the phrase, but falling into the wrong hands. A lot of people on social media intend well, but sometimes do more harm than good when they start putting out their own forecast based on that big data that's out there.
Yeah, that's a great question, and yeah, it's real hard to draw that line regarding what kind of data can be shared versus can't be shared. You get into some very vigorous arguments very quickly, and since the Weather Service is funded through federal taxpayer dollars, there's the whole argument about that they basically have paid for that information, and if there's not any good reason, they should have access to it if there's no good reason to hold it back. And we certainly have seen up here, we've had some pretty bad social media behavior with winter storms. I've taken off after a couple people on Twitter who have been forwarding some very bad information regarding potential snowfall amounts. Ridiculous time frames out. They grab something like the control run graphic off the European model, for example, was one case, and it had some god awful like 35 inches of snow in New Jersey, and they said, oh, this is for a storm upcoming, and they panicked people. And so that I think you go after the specific events and the specific offenders, so to speak, and just basically say don't do that. And what we try to do now is talk about having a trusted weather source. That you need to have a source that you can have some confidence with on the on social media. We were there was some chat here initially at the beginning about the weather we were supposed to have or did have, in terms of severe weather up here over this past weekend, and yeah, there were some very colorful graphics. with some extreme, severe weather scenarios painted for the Pennsylvania, New Jersey area. And those, so that problem's not going to ever go away, I don't think. I think what we need to do is just get a more mature discussion and a better get better at pivoting to trusted weather information, I think is the best way to do it.
I would jump in down here in Houston back in April when we had the massive flooding event just north and west of the city, and actually got the whole city involved in that. I mean, there were GFS model runs 2-3 days before the event that were spitting out like 72-hour rainfall totals of 15, 20 inches of rain. And when you look at other models, there's other things, and sort of the question that we have is, well, should we share that? Should we pass it on? And it's kind of like, no. I think that's sort of at least how we sort of operate, is that until we know what's going on and until we see something more official from the National Weather Service, we generally try to hold that back just to kind of temper down, because you don't want to show people 20 inches of rainfall and panic them. Yeah, it could happen, but there's also the chance it may not. So I think we try and be responsible and sort of take the lead with that, and just sort of hope that everybody else sort of follows suit. And I've bounced around on that throughout the last 4 or 5 years in terms of what I really think and what I really believe is right to do. And when you have some of these people that hype storms that aren't necessarily meteorologists and whatnot, and I think that sort of the conclusion I have is that, yeah, it's annoying, but as Gary said, it's not going away. It's not going to change. So I think it's up to us to sort of take the lead, and hopefully, you don't want to necessarily turn off somebody that's just trying to be a budding meteorologist, but they don't realize how much panic that they're causing out there. So you just have to be very careful and walk a very delicate, I think, fine line in this situation.
It's a good point. From a TV standpoint, there's always that competitive nature, because your bosses are coming to you saying, why aren't you putting this out there, or are you holding something back? But you have to make your own decision and stick with it. Your integrity, that if you don't feel like it's something you want to put out there on social media yet, you got to hold back. But at the same time, guys across the street may be doing it. As Shay and I mentioned, our newspaper put some stuff out there early that I probably wouldn't have put out there that early, and it was pretty hard hitting. So it's tough. It's from a competitive nature. For us in TV, the piece of the pie is a lot smaller than it ever was. So we're fighting for a smaller piece of the pie. It used to be you get a big old piece, but now there's so many other people fighting for the same pie. It's tough.
Matt, my question's for you. I kind of do a little bit of what you do. I work more closely with emergency managers than anything. And by the way, my boss is watching tonight, William, so he's saying it's a great conversation. He's one of our emergency managers here in the Western Carolina area. But my question is to you. You kind of play a different role. You're more preparing a forecast for businesses, the energy sector and stuff. How does that kind of differ from what Gary does or what Rob does, informing the public? You're talking to a business who is counting on industry to make the money to keep the business going. So how is that forecasting different than what Rob or Gary would do with TV and National Weather Service?
It's funny because I get asked that a lot, and having come from TV and worked in TV for about 5 years in the start of my career, it's kind of like my answer is there's really nothing different. Everything I do, in fact, even the graphics that I use to display the forecasts are almost like anything you would see on TV news or anything that you would see disseminated by the National Weather Service. It's just that the audience is different. That's all it is. And the information that you talk about and what you're doing is just geared to a different set of people, so you just kind of do the same sort of spiel that you would do. And, in the energy environment and just any business in general, the amount of time you have to connect with somebody that's using your information is even smaller than, what we've been talking about, what you see on the news. You have like 15, 20 seconds, and if you start going off on some meteorological spiel, they're going to tune you right out. So you got to cut right to the point and be very quick about it, and, just let them know what they need to know. And then you can go into, where your uncertainties are, and you have to be honest, obviously. You have to, the one thing I've learned is that, and maybe I'm fortunate because I've worked with people that are understanding, is that, if I'm not confident in something, I'm going to tell them and just be honest with them. And they seem to accept that, even when you're working in a business that, is dealing with a lot of money every day. So, sort of the other role that I have at work is also sort of in the business continuity environment. I've done this at a couple other energy jobs that I've had, And that's sort of the same thing, I guess, almost hybrid of what the National Weather Service does, and in you're complementing that information, but for people that open the office and keep the office open and tell employees to stay home or have to tell employees to leave site. During Sandy, we had offices up in New York City that were right on the Hudson and right on in Lower Manhattan that were kind of impacted, and that was just an incredible experience for me to try and work with business continuity folks in that regard. So it's more complex than just forecasting the weather, and it's not much different necessarily than what you see at NWS or on TV. You just have to adapt to a different audience.
Very cool.
All right. It sounds like we're coming up on 9 o'clock. I'm going to throw it around the panel, see if anyone else has any final questions.
Yeah, where's your light, Ricky?
It's right over here. I'm saving energy.
It's like a vampire in there.
Well, we'll see you're saving energy, but you've got your closet light on.
That's a good point. There's a dog back here, too. Last week we had my girlfriend saying, "That's a good boy," on our show with my dog in the background. Now he's chilling back here, laying on the floor. If you haven't seen me petting him every once in a while during this show, he's going to have to make an appearance one time.
I think my cat's tail went by before like a shark fin. I don't know if anybody caught that.
Claws coming to a theater near you.
We love weather and animals, apparently, on this show. So, well, with that, if there's no final questions, I'm going to send around the panel of our guests and let them tell folks how they can get in contact with them. Let's start with Matt and tell folks how they can get in contact with you, maybe through social media or other methods. Don't want to give out your cell phone number, but hey, social media is a good
Yeah, I'll avoid giving out my social security number or anything. I'm just simply my name, @Matt Lanza on Twitter. Feel free to give me a follow. I talk a lot about Houston stuff, obviously, but I try to stay engaged with other aspects of meteorology because I like to be involved. I like to know what's going on throughout the community. I think we're a small community of people, and it's good to stay in touch and interact as often as you can. And if you want to find out more about me, you can just search me on Google. You'll find something, or other LinkedIn or whatever I have out there. It exists.
Well, I've managed to find the light in the time it took you to do that, so we've got good news here.
There it is.
We're doing all right. I feel like I'm back in the studio, Rob, with all these lights around me now.
It looks like interrogation.
You need a light on the other side, though. That'll make it.
Yep. It's in balance. Not a good balance.
While you plug your social media, I'll find a flashlight. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, in terms of social media, Rob Fowler, Storm Team 2 on Facebook. I hate using the word fan page. I call it my weather page, but Facebook has a limit on friends, so you have to start these other pages. So we do a weather chat for our local audience or anybody who wants to listen in. Wednesday, I'm going to miss it tonight, but on Wednesday and Fridays, we do it on Facebook Live. And Rob Storm Team 2 on Twitter. We do a lot on Twitter. Jay and I communicate a lot via Twitter, so we try to stay as active as we can on social media. And I do have to plug, started using Snapchat. My daughter is 24. Said, "Dad, if you want to get to my audience, you got to do Snapchat." So I don't think I coined this phrase, but I do a Snapcast about 3 or 4 times a day. Jay's laughing because
I think you have, Rob, and you're opening Pandora's box for us. You know,
I do have to say I do follow Rob on Snapchat, so it is definitely worth the follow there. If you want to get a quick forecast for Charleston.
I just added you on Snapchat there.
Yeah, Snapchat's Rob Fowler Weather, Rob Fowler WX, and you can find it. And you can get the Charleston forecast or whatever. We have special appearances by people. It's just crazy.
It's worth the follow. I'm telling you, if you have Snapchat, you need to go follow Rob.
Thanks, Scotty. I appreciate it. Share the
No pressure.
Alrighty, well, I'm going to have to go find my phone while Gary plugs his social media so I can follow everyone and go follow Rob on Snapchat as well. Go ahead, Gary.
All right, yeah. Right now I'm active on Twitter. That's probably about it from a social media standpoint. That's based with my name, Gary Szatkowski. So if you see it, on the Carolina Weather Group page tonight, just use my name and you'll find me.
Alrighty, very good. And I did find a flashlight. It's not maybe studio quality, but
there we go.
I can spotlight myself.
Yeah.
This just takes away all the flaws, right? You don't have to put on makeup or anything. It's perfect.
I've seen a new side of you, Ricky.
I know. It's a brighter side of me, perhaps. Alrighty, folks. It is 9:03. This was the June 8th edition of the Carolina Weather Group with Cloudless Peter also joining us tonight, because that's who's popping up on my screen right now. So we had to make sure we got that in there as well. Anyway, all right, before I get into more trouble here, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week. Have a great night.
Oh, my